not every town dies in a disaster. Some simply vanish in silence, abandoned slowly until nothing is left but a name and a memory. Minnesota, known today for being calm and orderly, still holds traces of places like that. Some collapsed after big ambitions failed. Some died when the railroad looked elsewhere, and others disappeared when mines and ports stopped working. A few are now nothing more than a footpath, a quiet reservoir, or rotting industrial shells along Lake Superior's edge. Nininger is a ghost town remarkably close to Minneapolis, about a 30 to 40-minute drive southeast, along the Mississippi River in Dakota County. That closeness makes its story feel even stranger, because Nininger was not a small town without dreams. In the mid-1850s, it was heavily promoted by Ignatius Donnelly, a Minnesota political figure later known for his controversial Atlantis theories. Donnelly pitched Nininger as a city of the future and sold that vision to East Coast investors. Geographically, Nininger looked promising on a major river route with fertile land, and it briefly had a hotel, a dock, and an ambitious town plan. Reality said otherwise. The railroad chose a different route. Mississippi flooding damaged the area, and an economic downturn hit before the town could stabilize. By the late 19th century, Nininger was abandoned. Today, all that remains are historical markers and a quiet landscape. Silver Creek died in a much quieter way. It is still fairly close to Minneapolis, about an hour away, but the atmosphere feels like another world. Silver Creek never tried to become a big town. It was simply a small community shaped by farming, a flowing creek, and nature's slow rhythm. Change did not arrive as a financial crash or a railroad fight, but through reservoir construction and water management. The familiar landscape shifted gradually. Some residential areas were affected, old access routes disappeared, and the town's function fractured. There was no single dramatic event. People just left, one by one, once life stopped being practical there. Today, the Silver Creek Reservoir looks calm, even beautiful. From the water quiet of Silver Creek, the story moves to Vicksburg, a small ghost town in Wright County, still within a little over an hour of Minneapolis. Unlike Silver Creek, which was reshaped by the landscape, Vicksburg fell for a more classic reason: the loss of economic purpose. It grew as a small farming settlement tied to local transport routes, living on village traffic and small-scale trade. But Vicksburg was never big enough to survive once movement patterns changed. Routes shifted, commerce migrated to stronger neighboring towns, and Vicksburg slowly lost its reason to exist. No explosions, no disasters. Today, Vicksburg is almost invisible. You feel it more than you see it, leaving a rural hush that feels empty. Many people pass through without realizing they are crossing the footprint of a place that once had a name, a community, and a life of its own. The story continues with Chippewa City, a ghost town whose downfall is much easier to trace. Located in central Minnesota and still within roughly a 1.5-hour drive from Minneapolis, Chippewa City once lived for one main reason: the railroad. The town grew quickly as a stopover point, where workers, warehouses, and small businesses depended on constant rail traffic. But like many railroad towns, Chippewa City's fate was decided by choices made far away. When routes shifted and the station lost its importance, the town's pulse weakened almost immediately. Shops closed, residents moved out, and what once felt busy evaporated within a few decades. Now, only building foundations, traces of track, and open space remain, empty in a way that feels unnatural. The silence is not nature's doing. It is the silence left behind after people have been gone for a long time. If Chippewa City died abruptly when the tracks moved on, Lewiston is a town that still breathes but feels exhausted. In Winona County, Lewiston is not a full ghost town, and that is exactly what makes it more unsettling. It is still on the map, still has residents, but the signs of decline are hard to ignore. Lewiston grew as a small farming town with a steady local economy in the early 20th century. But agricultural modernization, a lack of new jobs, and younger generations leaving for bigger cities caused the population to stagnate and then slip. Local businesses shrank, older buildings linger without a clear purpose, and the town's rhythm slowed to a crawl. Places like Lewiston are sometimes called living ghost towns, alive on paper, but slowly fading in social reality. From Lewiston's slow weakening, we arrive at Forestville, a ghost town whose decline is documented with striking clarity. Forestville is one of Minnesota's most intact ghost town examples. Unlike the towns before it, Forestville was once genuinely busy. In the mid-19th century, it grew into a center of trade and milling, supported by surrounding farms and a reliable water supply. But its success was fragile. When the railroad ran through a nearby town instead, Forestville lost its main economic lifeline. Slowly but steadily, businesses closed, residents left, and the town stopped moving forward. By the late 1800s, Forestville was almost completely abandoned. Today, it sits inside Forestville/Mystery Cave State Park. Forestville was not destroyed. It was frozen in place, making it one of the most authentic and eerie ghost town locations in the state. Leaf River is a ghost town swallowed by rural Minnesota silence. In the central to northern part of the state, Leaf River was once a small farming town sustained by local transport routes. It never became large, but it was lively enough to support a store, a school, and a close-knit community where everyone knew everyone. The problem was that the Leaf River depended too heavily on a single economic base. As farming became more centralized and distribution routes shifted toward larger towns, Leaf River slowly lost its function. There was no defining catastrophe, just steady population decline and buildings left behind with nothing to replace them. Leaf River is known as one of those ghost towns most people never realize existed. Empty roads, wide open land, and faint structural remnants create a strong sense of isolation. From the barely noticed Leaf River, the story moves to Crow Wing State Park, home to what was once known as Old Crow Wing, one of the most important early towns in Minnesota history. In the 19th century, Old Crow Wing was a major trading center. It grew at the meeting point of the Crow Wing River and the Mississippi, making it a strategic hub for the fur trade and for interaction between Euro-American settlers, the Ojibwe, and independent traders. At its peak, Old Crow Wing was a functioning town. It had a hotel, stores, a judge's house, and it even served as the county seat. But it collapsed when the railroad chose a different town, Brainerd. Economic activity moved almost immediately, and Old Crow Wing was largely abandoned by the late 1800s. Today, the area is protected as a state park. Next, we reach Beaver, a small ghost town with an even quieter decline. Beaver sat deeper in Minnesota's interior and was once a simple settlement built on small-scale farming, local life. No major industry, no strategic advantage. Beaver existed because people lived and worked there. But once rural life patterns changed, Beaver had no strong reason to endure. Farm mechanization reduced the need for labor, younger residents left for larger towns, and public services slowly disappeared. The school closed, stores stopped operating, and homes were left vacant with no replacements. Now, Beaver has almost slipped out of public awareness entirely. Not loud, not dramatic, just a silence that feels permanent. The journey takes us farther north to Finland, a small town whose quiet feels both natural and unsettling. Located in Lake County, Finland is not a pure ghost town, but it is often described as a place that is close to disappearing. It was founded by Finnish immigrants in the late 19th century, drawn to work in the forests, mines, and rail lines along the North Shore. In its prime, Finland lived as a tight ethnic community, anchored by a church, a school, and strong traditions. But as logging and mining weakened, the economic reason to stay faded with them. The population dropped sharply, and many older buildings lost their original purpose. Today, Finland is surrounded by dense woods and long, empty roads. Interestingly, despite being small and isolated, it still holds on to its Finnish cultural identity, making it feel like a preserved slice of the past, left behind far from the modern world. From Finland, isolated by northern forest, the story moves to Kerrick, a small town in Carleton County that is often seen as sitting on the edge of becoming a ghost town. Kerrick emerged in the early 20th century as a railroad stop and a service hub for nearby farmers and loggers. For decades, it had a general store, a school, and a steady pulse of local life. But when the railroad's role faded and the timber industry stopped being the backbone of the local economy, Kerrick lost its main function. The population shrank fast, businesses closed, and the town's rhythm slowed to nearly a standstill. Administratively, Kerrick is still alive, but visually and socially, it feels hollow. Today, its streets often look empty, lined with older buildings that remain standing without a clear role. From Kerrick, which seems to have stalled mid-story, we reach Muskoda, a ghost town that has almost completely vanished in physical form. Muskoda briefly grew along the Northern Pacific Railroad as a collection point for agricultural goods, before losing its reason to exist when the rail line shifted. Without the train, the town did not collapse in a dramatic moment. It simply faded away. Today, Muskoda is remembered through trails and open parkland that follow the old rail corridor and the footprint of the former settlement. The route still draws walkers and cyclists, especially locals and history-minded visitors. Ironically, that modern movement only highlights what is missing. People pass through without realizing they are crossing ground where houses, shops, and warehouses once stood. From Muskoda, vanished so completely it barely left a building behind, the story moves to Soudan, a place where a ghost town isn't born from being forgotten, but from the sudden end of a massive industry. Soudan grew around the Soudan mine, the oldest and deepest iron mine in Minnesota, which began operating in the late 19th century. For decades, the town existed solely for the mine. Workers' homes, public facilities, and daily life all revolved around what happened underground. When the iron industry declined and the mine finally shut down in the 1960s, Soudan lost its only reason to exist. With no alternative economy, people left, buildings were abandoned, and the atmosphere changed overnight. Today, the area is part of Soudan Underground Mine State Park. The mine structures, old buildings, and deep shafts are still there, creating a heavy, unsettling mood. Even more unusually, The Soudan mine was once used for particle physics experiments, making it one of the strangest ghost town remnants, where dead industry meets modern science. On the edge of Lake Superior sits Split Rock, where silence collides with breathtaking scenery. Split Rock is not a ghost town in the classic sense, but its atmosphere often feels colder and lonelier than many places that truly died. The area is known for the iconic Split Rock Lighthouse, built in 1910 after a series of deadly shipwrecks on Lake Superior. For decades, the lighthouse served as the center of a small, isolated world. Lighthouse keepers and their families lived here, separated from everything, enduring brutal weather and long winters. When modern navigation made the lighthouse unnecessary, the site gradually stopped being a living settlement. Now Split Rock is a historic landmark and state park, well-maintained, clean, and preserved, yet the quiet still lingers like a presence that never really left. The story ends somewhere harsher and colder, Taconite Harbor. Unlike the other places, Taconite Harbor is an industrial ghost town, built and abandoned for one single purpose. It was developed in the mid-20th century as a shipping port for taconite, processed iron ore, that became a backbone of northern Minnesota's industry. Everything here was designed to function: the harbor, conveyors, processing facilities, and worker housing. When the taconite industry shifted and operations were shut down, Taconite Harbor instantly lost its meaning. There was no slow fade. Work stopped, workers left, and the industrial site was left empty, facing Lake Superior. The remaining concrete buildings and rusting steel structures feel alien against the surrounding wilderness. Today, Taconite Harbor comes across as blunt and hostile. Lake wind, crashing waves, and skeletal industrial frames combine into a cold atmosphere that cuts straight through you